Today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
I grew up in an environment where mental health was not talked about. I told myself, get over it.
But you didn't get over it.
My suicide attempt left me paralyzed.
Once you made the decision, did you feel like there was no turning back?
Immediately, I knew that I had made a mistake, and I was incredibly scared to die.
The biggest mistake young people make is they compare their reality with everybody else's social mask. Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today is going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
Get ready. Take care of you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're continuing our in-depth discussion from yesterday about the mental health crisis among teens and really anyone under 30. The Surgeon General's advisory stated before the COVID-19 pandemic, mental health challenges were the leading cause of disability and poor life outcomes in young people, but the issues were greatly exacerbated by the lockdowns. This issue really hits home with my next guest. Emma says she was a cheerleader and picture-perfect American girl who appeared happy on the outside but was secretly struggling with severe anxiety and depression. It led her to make a near-fatal decision that changed her life forever.
911, what's there? Oh my God, I heard my daughter shot herself. Okay, is she breathing? Yes, she's breathing. Stay with me, baby girl, please.
I attempted suicide when I was 16 years old. I would describe myself as an all-American, picture-perfect girl, but I was secretly struggling with severe anxiety and depression. I started to really feel my anxiety take hold when I was about 12 years old. I kept my feelings to myself, and I isolated myself more. I thought the only people who had experienced anxiety and depression came from troubled homes and experienced severe trauma in their lives. My suicide attempt resulted in a spinal cord injury that left me paralyzed. They said I may walk or I may not. I was paralyzed from the neck down and was diagnosed a C4 quadriplegic. After improving my physical health, I focused on my mental health. Looking back, I was never really taught coping skills to endure life's challenges. I've made it my mission to raise awareness about mental health. I've had the privilege of creating a feature-length documentary film called My Ascension. I just know that if it saves at least one person, or even helps one person to just stand up and be like, I have those feelings and I have those thoughts, then it's worth it. In my opinion, if young people experience anxiety and depression at a young age and they don't address it, I think the chances of them experiencing those similar issues as they get older are pretty high. Maybe this is my calling, you know? Maybe my pain and suffering can help someone else.
Well, Emma, please come on out if you would. Well, Emma, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
This happened how many years ago?
5.
5 years ago?
2017.
Mm-hmm. And how long had you been thinking about this before you actually did it?
I would say I started having suicidal ideation type of thinking when I got to high school, so when I was like 14. But actually, it took about a month of active suicidal thinking for me to make the decision to attempt to take my life.
Mm-hmm. And you started having the emotional pain, the feelings that you were having for quite some time, and then it really peaked and got tough in that last month. But you didn't feel like you could talk to anybody about it during that time. You kept on the happy face, the perfect American girl face. Why is that?
Well, because of the stigma mainly. I grew up in an environment where mental health was not talked about. You didn't talk about your feelings. You worked through your problems and you got better on your own. And I really dealt with the feeling of needing to be perfect all the time. So those imperfect thoughts and feelings I was ashamed of. And because of that feeling of shame, associated with those types of thoughts and feelings, I never thought that it was justifiable or appropriate to share with someone. Internally, I told myself, no one would care and no one's going to believe you, and get over it.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't get over it, and you heard me talking with Graceland about her internal dialogue and what she was saying to herself.
Absolutely.
What were you saying to yourself in those final days?
You're such a burden. You're such a problem. Around the time that I made the attempt, I had been in trouble with my parents, sneaking out. And academically, I was failing. I didn't have any college prospects. My sport, I decided to give it up. I didn't try out for the team my senior year. So it kind of felt like my life was crumbling around me. And so the biggest thought that I told myself was, people would be better off without you, and you're a burden. Your problems are a burden. And in the moment, attempting to take my life felt like the smartest thing that I could do to alleviate myself from the pain.
Were there red flags that people around you missed when you look back now?
Yeah, hindsight, everything is 20/20, of course, but there were definitely red flags that went missed. Around the time that I really started to struggle, my depression really took hold. I began sneaking out, hanging out with people who I otherwise had no interest in hanging out with, and my baseline behaviors really just went haywire. And because those behaviors were becoming prevalent, my parents, obviously not having any knowledge about the warning signs to be aware of with mental health challenges with youth, they were completely in the dark. So they assumed that those types of behaviors were your typical teenage behaviors. And so I was disciplined, and getting in trouble because of those behaviors only made me feel worse with the whole situation.
Yeah, so they confused depression with rebellion.
Yeah.
And which is an easy mistake to make. Yeah. When you're looking at it then, like you say, hindsight's 20/20. And let me just address the kind of elephant in the room here, because if you're wondering, well, what did she do? How did she attempt to do this? I don't talk about those things on the air. There are certain media guidelines that we try to follow to avoid the contagion effect and suggestibility, copycat sort of things for other young people. So, and that's just one of the things that we don't get into. It just doesn't add to the story, and it's not something that's good for other young people to hear. So we stay very general about that. And I know we talked to you about that ahead of time. But was there a threshold that you crossed when you knew, okay, I'm doing this?
To give some context, a week before my attempt, I was in New York City on a modeling trip. A local photographer reached out to me and invited me on the trip. And it was 8 girls, some of these girls I had never met before. And on the trip, I felt like my joy had returned, and I finally felt like myself again. And so I feel like having gone on that trip and getting to experience how good life could be, and having something to compare it to back home, I felt like was sort of a catalyst for me, and maybe like the threshold that I stepped over to making this decision a reality.
Mm-hmm. And once you made the decision, did you feel like there was no turning back?
100%. I had instant regret. Immediately after I made the attempt, I knew that I had made a mistake, that it's not what I wanted to do. And I was incredibly scared to die and have no one know my story, have no one really know the truth and the real reasons that led me to that feeling. I was terrified.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to 16-year-old Emma if you could talk to her right now?
Don't be so hard on yourself. Quit beating yourself up for things you can't control. Give yourself time. Take it one day at a time. Embrace your feelings. No feeling is something you should be ashamed of. If a feeling is there, that means it's there for a reason. I would tell her, be open and honest when you're talking about how you feel. Don't filter it, because I did that a lot. I filtered my feelings
to protect others because I didn't want to upset them. I didn't want to burden them. I didn't want to make my parents feel like they failed me. And so I would tell myself, just be real, just be yourself, and just be honest with how you're feeling, because it could save you. It would have saved you. And thank God I'm still here and I have a second chance. But I would tell myself all of those things and much more.
And I know you've looked into this since then, so you've learned that one of the number one justifications people give themselves for ending their own lives is that they feel like they're a burden, and that everybody that's around them will be better off if they're not there.
100% not the case. I wish that if I could go back some way, somehow, I would tell myself, you would be getting rid of your pain, but you would be giving it to everyone else.
So that's when you become a burden. What would it have meant to you at 16 to have had this experience that we're having right now then?
Absolutely everything. It would have been so affirming, so validating. You have no idea how validating all of this is for people who struggle, because the world makes it seem like, with social media and everything, like everyone has it together. No one has problems.
The biggest mistake that young people make is they compare their reality with everybody else's social mask.
100%.
Because everybody puts on a social mask and goes out into the world. But you know your own reality. And so you compare your reality, your feelings of being lost, your feelings of being depressed, your feelings of not fitting in, your feelings of being a burden, to everybody else's, I'm okay. And you lose every time when you do that, don't you?
Yeah.
And this conversation that we're having right now causes even one girl to say, I'm not going to do it. What's it mean to you to know that what you're doing right now is saving young girls' lives this very moment?
Purpose. I feel so much purpose. I am truly on a mission. And all it takes is one. If one person is saved, touched, impacted, changes their choice, then it's worth it.
Because you know that's happening right now. Somewhere in America, somewhere around the world right now, somebody's watching this and saying, you know what? She's right. It's just not the thing to do. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
That would mean everything to me. That's the goal. That's why I put myself through this, honestly. Because I've dealt with the loss of suicide, and I've experienced it. And it's a road that I don't want anyone's family to have to walk, or the road that I walked.
Well, it would have been a lot easier for you to stay home.
Probably so.
Instead of come here and talk about this. But God bless you for doing it. Okay? Emma, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Her documentary about her inspiring journey, My Ascension, is out right now, and you really want to take a look at it.